Have you ever experienced a moment when your entire world shifted on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life? I have, at my son's wedding. And in that moment, I learned how deceiving 28 years of being a father could be. When an unwanted truth comes to you, you first deny it. Then anger comes. But I went straight to the acceptance stage, because what was happening before my eyes was so clear that there was no other explanation. The scent of jasmine filled the air that Saturday morning in June. I stood in front of the mirror in the hotel room, adjusting my navy blue tie for the third time. My hands were shaking slightly, not from nervousness but from pure joy. My son Michael was getting married. My boy, my pride, the reason I worked double shifts at the construction company for 15 years, was about to start his own family. I looked at my reflection and saw a man in his early 50s, grey threading through his dark hair, laugh lines carved deep around his eyes. I'd earned every one of those lines watching Michael grow up, teaching him to ride a bike, helping him with his homework, cheering from the bleachers at his football games. Today, I would walk him down the aisle since his mother passed away 3 years ago from cancer. The knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. "Dad, you ready?" Michael's voice carried that familiar excitement I remembered from Christmas mornings when he was 8. "Coming, son?" I called back, taking one last look in the mirror. Today was perfect. Everything was perfect. The church was stunning. White roses and baby's breath adorned every pew, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor. I took my place in the front row, watching as guests filed in. Michael stood at the altar in his black tuxedo, his best man Jake beside him. He kept checking his watch and running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I smiled, remembering the day he first told me about Sarah. He'd come home from college with this glow about him, talking non-stop about this amazing girl he'd met in his economics class. "Dad, she's incredible," he'd said, his eyes lighting up in a way I'd never seen before. "She's smart, funny, beautiful. I think she might be the one." Over the next 2 years, I watched their relationship blossom. Sarah was everything Michael had described and more. She was studying business management, came from a good family in Colorado, and had this infectious laugh that could fill a room. When Michael proposed last Christmas, I cried. Actually cried. My boy had found his happiness. The music began and everyone stood. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their soft pink dresses, followed by Sarah's maid of honor, her sister Lisa from Colorado. Then the music swelled and there she was. Sarah looked absolutely radiant in her white gown. The dress was elegant, not too fancy, just perfect for her. Her blonde hair was styled in an updo with small white flowers woven through it. As she walked down the aisle with her father, I saw Michael's face transform. The nervousness melted away, replaced by pure love and amazement. This was it. This was the moment I'd dreamed about since the day Michael was born. My son was marrying the woman of his dreams, and I was here to witness it all. The ceremony began beautifully. Pastor Williams spoke about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Michael and Sarah exchanged vows they'd written themselves, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. When Pastor Williams asked if anyone objected to the union, the church fell silent except for the gentle rustle of fabric and the distant sound of birds singing outside. Then Sarah's phone rang. At first, it was just a soft buzzing from somewhere in the vicinity of the altar. Sarah's bouquet was resting on a small table nearby, and I assumed her phone was tucked somewhere in the arrangement, or maybe in a small clutch. The buzzing continued, growing slightly louder. Pastor Williams paused, smiling gently. "Technology," he said with a chuckle, and the congregation laughed softly. "Perhaps someone could silence that for us." But Sarah's face had gone completely white. Not the pale white of a nervous bride, but the stark, terrified white of someone who had just seen a ghost. Her hands, which had been steady while holding Michael's, began to tremble visibly. "Sarah," Michael whispered, concern creeping into his voice. "You okay, honey?" The phone stopped ringing, and for a moment everything seemed to return to normal. Pastor Williams continued with the ceremony, asking for the rings. But I couldn't stop watching Sarah's face. Something was very, very wrong. The phone rang again. This time Sarah's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She dropped Michael's hands and stepped backward, her breathing becoming quick and shallow. The color drained from her face completely, and she looked like she might faint. I need... She stammered, looking around frantically. Sarah, what's wrong? Michael reached for her, but she pulled away. I need to get that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Get what? Your phone? Sarah, we're in the middle of our wedding ceremony. But Sarah was already moving toward the table where her bouquet rested. She frantically searched through the flowers and ribbons until she found a small white clutch hidden beneath the arrangement. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open it. The entire congregation was watching now, murmurs rippling through the pews. Michael looked confused and hurt. Pastor Williams appeared concerned, and I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. Sarah finally got her phone out of the clutch. The screen was lit up with an incoming call. From where I sat in the front row, I could see the caller ID clearly. It read, David, home. Now I need you to understand something. My name is David Harrison, and I was sitting right there in the front row of that church, watching my son get married. I was not calling anyone. My phone was on silent, tucked safely in my jacket pocket, and had been since I'd arrived at the church an hour earlier. Sarah stared at the phone screen, and I watched as every drop of blood drained from her face. She looked up, her eyes scanning the congregation until they found mine. When our eyes met, the look of pure terror on her face told me everything I needed to know. There was another David in Sarah's life. Another David who called her from home. Another David who had her number saved in her phone as David Home. The phone stopped ringing, but the damage was done. The silence in the church was deafening. Michael stood at the altar, looking between Sarah and the phone, trying to understand what was happening. Sarah, he said slowly. Who's David? And that's when Sarah did something that confirmed every terrible suspicion that was racing through my mind. She looked at me again, then at Michael, then at the phone in her hands, and she ran. She didn't walk quickly toward the back of the church. She didn't excuse herself politely. She gathered up her dress in her hands and ran down the aisle, her white heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. She pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the church, and they slammed shut behind her with a sound that seemed to echo forever. The church erupted in shocked whispers and confused murmurs. Michael stood frozen at the altar, his mouth slightly open, staring at the doors through which his bride had just disappeared. Pastor Williams looked completely bewildered, and the bridesmaids huddled together, whispering frantically. I sat in my pew, my mind racing. Sarah had another life, another David, someone who called her from home while she was here about to marry my son. The implications were staggering, and I felt sick to my stomach. Michael finally moved, starting down the aisle after Sarah, but I stood up and caught his arm. Wait, I said quietly. Dad, I have to go after her. Something's wrong. Maybe it's an emergency. Maybe someone in her family. I looked into my son's eyes, these hopeful, confused eyes, and I knew I had to tell him what I'd seen. But not here, not in front of 150 wedding guests. Michael, I said, keeping my voice low, we need to talk, privately. Something in my tone must have gotten through to him because he nodded slowly. He turned to the congregation, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. We need a few minutes. Please, everyone, just give us a moment. We walked to the small room behind the altar where the pastor prepared for services. Jake, Michael's best man, followed us along with Pastor Williams. I closed the door behind us and took a deep breath. Dad, what's going on? Do you know something? Why did Sarah look at you like that? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. Michael, my phone has been on silent this entire time. I haven't made any calls today. Okay, so? Son, the caller ID on Sarah's phone said, David, home, I'm David, but I wasn't calling her. The confusion on Michael's face slowly gave way to understanding, and then to something much worse. The color drained from his cheeks and he sank into one of the chairs. You're saying there's another David? Someone she lives with? That's exactly what I'm saying. Jake whistled low. Dude, that's impossible, Michael finished. That's impossible. Sarah lives in Denver. She has her own apartment. I've been there dozens of times. When was the last time you were there? Michael thought for a moment. About 3 weeks ago. We went to get some of her things for the move here after the wedding. And before that? I don't know. Maybe 2 months? We usually meet here or travel together. She's been so busy with work and wedding planning. The pieces were falling into place and none of them painted a good picture. I put my hand on my son's shoulder. Michael, I think we need to find out who this other David is. Just then there was a soft knock on the door. Pastor Williams opened it to find Sarah's maid of honor, Lisa, standing there with tears in her eyes. Is Michael in there? I need to talk to him. It's about Sarah. Come in, Michael said, standing up quickly. Lisa, what's going on? Where is she? Lisa came into the room and closed the door behind her. She looked around at all of us, her face pale and her hands shaking. I've been keeping a secret, she said quietly, and I can't keep it anymore. Not after what just happened. What secret? Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. Lisa took a deep breath. Sarah isn't who you think she is. The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. Michael sat back down heavily. What do you mean? Her real name is Sarah Mitchell, not Sarah Collins like she told you. And she's married, Michael. She's been married for 6 years to a man named David Mitchell. They live in Boulder, not Denver. She has 2 kids. The silence that followed was the kind that changes everything. It was the silence of a life being torn apart, of dreams crumbling, of trust shattering into a million pieces. Michael's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, hurt, anger, and finally a kind of hollow shock. 2 kids? He whispered. Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. A 5-year-old girl named Emma and a 3-year-old boy named Tyler. I'm not really her sister. I'm her sister-in-law. David's sister. Sarah begged me to help her. Said she was going to leave David after the wedding. That she just needed more time to figure out how to tell Michael the truth. But why would she marry me if she's already married? I don't know, Lisa sobbed. I begged her not to go through with this. I told her it was bigamy, that it was illegal, that it would destroy everyone involved. But she said she loved you and she couldn't give you up. I felt like I was going to be sick. My son had been played. Completely and thoroughly deceived by a woman who was not only married but had children. A woman who was willing to commit a federal crime to keep living her double life. Where is she now? I asked Lisa. She's probably on her way back to Boulder. David was supposed to take the kids to his mother's house this weekend, so Sarah could have her business trip to Seattle. But Emma got sick with a fever, so he stayed home with them. He's been trying to call Sarah all morning because Emma's been asking for her. Michael looked up at Lisa with hollow eyes. Business trip to Seattle. That's what she told David she was doing this weekend. He has no idea about you, about any of this. He thinks his wife is at a business conference. I watched my son process this information, and my heart broke for him. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he was going to spend his life with, had been living a complete lie. She had a husband, children, an entire other life that she'd hidden from him for 2 years. Michael, I said gently, we need to call the police. He looked at me with confusion. The police? Son, what Sarah just tried to do is called bigamy. It's a felony. She was about to marry you while still being married to someone else. That's a serious crime. Pastor Williams, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke up. Legally, the marriage wouldn't have been valid anyway. But you're right, David. This is a criminal matter. Michael stood up slowly like an old man, despite being only 26 years old. I need some air, he said. I need to think. Michael, wait, Lisa called after him. I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have stopped this before it got this far. My son turned back to look at her. Why didn't you? Because Sarah is all the family David has left. Their parents died in a car accident 4 years ago, and she's been struggling ever since. When she met you, she seemed happy for the first time in years. I thought, I hoped she would come to her senses and choose one life or the other. I never thought she'd actually go through with marrying you. Michael nodded slowly, but I could see he wasn't really processing what she was saying anymore. He was in shock, and who could blame him? We walked back out into the church, where 150 confused wedding guests were still sitting in the pews, whispering among themselves. Michael walked to the front and turned to address them. I want to thank everyone for coming today, he said, his voice stronger than I expected. Unfortunately, there will be no wedding. The bride there have been some complications. We appreciate your understanding, and we're sorry for any inconvenience. People began to murmur and gather their things, clearly wanting answers, but polite enough not to demand them. I watched as our friends and family members filed out of the church, their faces full of concern and confusion. When the church was finally empty except for family, Michael turned to me. Dad, I want to find this David Mitchell. I want to talk to him. Son, I don't think that's a good idea right now. I need to know if he knows about me. I need to know if this was all part of some plan, or if he's as much a victim as I am. Lisa, who was still with us, spoke up quietly. He doesn't know, Michael. David thinks his wife is faithful. He has no idea she's been living a double life. Then he deserves to know the truth. I looked at my son, at the determination in his eyes despite the pain, and I felt a surge of pride even in the midst of this disaster. He was thinking about the other victim in this situation, not just himself. All right, I said, but we do this the right way. We call the police first, report what happened, and then we figure out how to contact David Mitchell. As we walked out of the church that day, I couldn't help but think about how quickly life can change. That morning I'd been the proud father of the groom. Now I was the father of a victim of fraud and bigamy. The woman I thought was going to be my daughter-in-law was actually a criminal who had been living a lie for 2 years. But as devastating as this was for Michael, I had a feeling it was just the beginning. If Sarah Mitchell was capable of deceiving 2 men so completely for so long, there was no telling what other secrets she might be hiding. The phone call that had interrupted the wedding ceremony wasn't just from Sarah's husband. It was the sound of her entire house of lies finally collapsing, and we were all about to be buried in the rubble. The ride to the police station was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Michael sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window without really seeing anything. Every few minutes he would shake his head slightly, as if he was still trying to convince himself that this was all some terrible nightmare. I kept glancing at him, wanting to say something comforting. But what do you say to your son when his entire world has just collapsed? When the woman he loved enough to marry has been revealed as a fraud, a bigamist, someone living a double life with another family? Detective Rebecca Morrison met us at the station. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She led us to a small conference room and offered us coffee, which we both declined. I want to make sure I understand this correctly, she said, pulling out a notepad. Your son was about to marry a woman named Sarah Collins, but during the ceremony, her phone rang with a call from someone named David, listed as calling from home. You are David Harrison, the father of the groom, and you were not the one making that call. That's correct, I said. And we've since learned from her maid of honor that Sarah's real name is Sarah Mitchell. She's already married to David Mitchell, and they have 2 children together. Detective Morrison raised her eyebrows. And the maid of honor is? Lisa Mitchell, the husband's sister. She's been helping Sarah maintain this deception. Where is Lisa now? She's at the hotel where the reception was supposed to be held. She said she was going to call her brother and tell him what happened. Detective Morrison made several notes. Attempted bigamy is a felony in this state. We'll need to locate Sarah Mitchell and bring her in for questioning. Do you have any idea where she might have gone? Michael spoke for the first time since we'd arrived. Lisa said she was probably heading back to Boulder, to her real family. We'll contact the Boulder police and have them do a welfare check at the Mitchell residence. In the meantime, I'll need statements from both of you, and from Lisa Mitchell when she's available. As we gave our statements, I found myself thinking about David Mitchell, this man I'd never met, who was about to have his life turned upside down just as thoroughly as Michael's had been. At least Michael had discovered the truth before he was legally bound to Sarah. David Mitchell had been living with this lie for who knows how long. After we finished at the police station, Michael and I drove to the hotel where the reception was supposed to be held. The venue looked surreal, tables set with white linens and centerpieces, a beautiful wedding cake sitting untouched, and absolutely no guests. Lisa was sitting alone at the head table, her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw us, she ended her call and walked over with tears streaming down her face. I told him, she said simply. I told David everything. How did he take it? I asked, though I could guess, about as well as you'd expect. He didn't believe me at first. Then he got angry. Then he just broke down. He said Sarah had been acting strange lately, taking more business trips, being secretive with her phone. He thought maybe she was planning to leave him, but he never imagined anything like this. Michael sat down heavily in one of the reception chairs. Is he going to press charges? I don't know. Right now he's just trying to figure out how to explain to their kids why Mommy isn't coming home tonight. The weight of that statement hit all of us. 2 innocent children, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, were about to become victims of their mother's deception just as much as Michael and David were. "Lisa," I said gently, "we need David's contact information. The police are going to want to talk to him, and honestly, I think Michael deserves the chance to speak with him too." She nodded and gave me David Mitchell's phone number. "Just please be gentle with him. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve any of this." That evening, back at my house, Michael and I sat on the back porch with a couple of beers. The silence stretched between us, both of us lost in our own thoughts about the day's revelations. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Michael said finally. "How could I have been so blind?" "Son, you weren't blind. You were in love. Sarah was deliberately deceiving you. This isn't your fault, but there had to be signs, Dad. Looking back, there were so many times when her behavior didn't make sense. Like how she never wanted me to meet any of her friends from home, or how she was always vague about her family. She said her parents were dead, but now I'm wondering if that was even true." I thought about that. "What else did she tell you about her background?" "She said she was an only child, that her parents died in a car accident a few years ago, and that's why she moved to Denver. She said she worked in marketing for a tech company, but she traveled a lot for work, so we couldn't always spend weekends together." Every detail sounded carefully crafted to explain away the inconsistencies that would naturally arise from living a double life. Sarah Mitchell was clearly more calculating than any of us had realized. "Dad, I want to call David Mitchell. I want to talk to him." I understood the impulse, but I was concerned about Michael's emotional state. "Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? I need to know what kind of person Sarah really is. David lived with her for 6 years. He knows her in a way I never did. And besides, he deserves to hear this from me, not just from the police." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Michael dialed the number Lisa had given us, and I listened as it rang on speakerphone. "Hello?" The voice that answered was tired, defeated. "Is this David Mitchell?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Michael Harrison. I think your sister Lisa may have mentioned me." There was a long pause. "You're the guy Sarah was going to marry today?" "Yes, sir. I'm calling because I wanted to talk to you if you're willing. I know this is probably the last thing you want to deal with right now." "Actually," David Mitchell said with a bitter laugh, "talking to you might be the only way I'm going to get any answers. Lisa told me what happened, but I still can't wrap my head around it. How long were you and Sarah? How long was this going on?" 2 years. We met in college when she was taking some continuing education classes. She told me she lived in Denver and worked for a marketing company." "Marketing company?" David's voice was flat. "She works part-time at a local veterinary clinic. Has for 3 years. I don't think she's ever worked in marketing in her life." Michael and I exchanged glances. Another lie, and not a small one. "Mr. Mitchell, can I ask you something? Had Sarah been acting differently lately?" "Yeah, she had. For the past few months, she's been taking these weekend business trips to Seattle. Said her company was expanding, and she needed to help set up the new office. She'd leave Friday morning and come back Sunday night, exhausted and distant. When I asked about her work, she'd give vague answers and change the subject. She was spending those weekends with me," Michael said quietly. "I live about an hour from Denver. She'd come down Friday after work and stay until Sunday." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that I thought David might have hung up. Finally he spoke. "So while I was home with our kids, thinking my wife was working hard to provide for our family, she was actually playing house with you." "David, I swear to you I had no idea you existed. If I had known she was married, if I had known about your children, I never would have pursued a relationship with her." "I believe you," David said, and there was something in his voice, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that they were both victims in this situation. "What are you going to do now?" Michael asked. "I don't know. I have to think about my kids first. Emma keeps asking where Mommy is, and I don't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her mother is a liar and a criminal?" The pain in his voice was heartbreaking. I motioned for Michael to hand me the phone. "David, this is Michael's father, David Harrison. I know we're strangers, but I want you to know that if there's anything we can do to help, anything at all, please let us know." "Thank you. That means more than you know. Have you heard from Sarah at all since this afternoon?" "No, her phone goes straight to voicemail. I don't even know where she is." That was troubling. If Sarah had indeed left the church and driven back to Boulder, she should have been there by now. The drive was only about 2 hours. "David, have you checked your house?" Your cars. Maybe she came back and left again. I checked everything. Her car isn't here, and none of her clothes are missing. It's like she just vanished. After we ended the call, Michael and I sat in silence for a while, processing everything we'd learned. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a woman who had gotten in over her head with 2 relationships. She was a systematic liar who had constructed elaborate false identities and maintained them for years. The next morning, Detective Morrison called with an update. We've issued a BOLO for Sarah Mitchell and her vehicle. Boulder PD did a welfare check at the family residence and confirmed that she never returned home last night. We've also discovered something else. What's that? Sarah Collins, the identity she used with your son, doesn't legally exist. The social security number she gave belongs to a woman who died in Oregon 3 years ago. Sarah has been using a dead woman's identity. The implications of this were staggering. Identity theft was a federal crime, and it suggested that Sarah's deception went much deeper than just bigamy. Detective, what does this mean for Michael? Is he in any legal trouble? No, your son is a victim here. But we're now looking at multiple felonies: attempted bigamy, identity theft, fraud. When we find Sarah Mitchell, she's going to be facing serious prison time. That afternoon, I drove Michael back to the hotel to collect his things and cancel all the wedding arrangements. The venue manager was understanding and agreed to refund most of their money given the circumstances. As we were leaving the hotel, Michael's phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. Should I answer it? He asked. I nodded. We needed to know where she was and what her plan was. Hello, Sarah. Michael, thank God, I've been trying to work up the courage to call you all day. Where are you? I'm somewhere safe. Michael, I know you must hate me right now, but I need you to know that my feelings for you were real. I love you. I've always loved you. You love me? Michael's voice was incredulous. Sarah, you're married. You have children. You've been lying to me for 2 years. I know, but you have to understand. My marriage to David was over long before I met you. We stayed together for the kids, but there was no love left between us. When I met you, you made me feel alive again. You made me remember what it was like to be happy. So why didn't you just get divorced? It's complicated. David would have fought for custody, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing my children. I thought I could make it work. I thought I could have both lives. That's called bigamy, Sarah. It's a felony. I know that now. Michael, I made a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can go away together, start over somewhere new. I grabbed the phone from Michael. Sarah, this is David Harrison, Michael's father. The police are looking for you. You need to turn yourself in. Mr. Harrison, please. I know how this looks, but I'm not a bad person. I just made some poor choices. Poor choices? You committed identity theft. You were about to commit bigamy. You've destroyed 2 families with your lies. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, but they did get hurt. Your husband doesn't know how to explain to his children where their mother is. My son is heartbroken and humiliated. The woman he loved doesn't even exist. There was silence on the other end of the line. Sarah, Michael said, taking the phone back, just tell me one thing. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just some kind of game to you? Of course I loved you. I love you right now. That's why I'm calling. Michael, meet me tonight. Let me explain everything. Let me show you that we can still have a future together. Sarah, you're delusional if you think I would ever trust you again. Please, just give me one chance. Meet me at our place, the little cabin where we spent our first weekend together. Remember, we talked about going back there for our honeymoon. I shook my head vigorously at Michael, but he was already responding. I remember. Tonight at 8 o'clock. Just you. We can talk about everything, and I'll answer any questions you have. Please, Michael. I'm begging you. Michael looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted closure, wanted to understand how he could have been so thoroughly deceived. But this was clearly a trap. I'll think about it, he said finally. I'll be waiting. I love you, Michael. She hung up before he could respond. You're not seriously considering meeting her, I said. Dad, I need answers. I need to understand how this happened. Then we called Detective Morrison and set up a sting operation. Sarah is a fugitive now. If she wants to meet, we use that to catch her. Michael was quiet for a long moment. You're right. But I want to be there when they arrest her. I want to look her in the eye and ask her why she did this to me. We called Detective Morrison and explained Sarah's call. She was very interested in the meeting and immediately began coordinating with local law enforcement to set up surveillance at the cabin. "This is good," she said. "If Sarah shows up tonight, we'll have her. But Michael, I want you to understand that this could be dangerous. We don't know how desperate she is or what she might do when she realizes she's been caught." "I understand. But I need to be there. You can be there, but you'll be wired, and we'll have officers positioned all around the area. At the first sign of trouble, they'll move in." As evening approached, I found myself wishing that none of this had ever happened. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry was whether I would cry during my son's wedding ceremony. Now I was watching him prepare to confront the woman who had shattered his life, while police officers fitted him with a hidden microphone. The cabin where Michael and Sarah had spent their first weekend together was about 30 miles outside of town, nestled in a secluded area surrounded by pine trees. It was the perfect place for a romantic getaway, and also the perfect place for someone desperate to try something dangerous. As we drove to the location where the police command post had been set up, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something much bigger than we realized. Sarah Mitchell had proven herself capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions for years. What else might she be capable of? "Dad," Michael said as we pulled into the parking area where Detective Morrison was waiting, "whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that I'm grateful you were there for me today. I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you. You're my son, Michael. I'll always be there for you." "I know. And after tonight, maybe we can finally put all of this behind us and move on." I hoped he was right. But something told me that Sarah Mitchell had more secrets than we'd discovered so far. And before this was over, we were going to learn just how deep her deceptions really went. The command post was set up in a ranger station about 2 miles from the cabin. Detective Morrison had assembled a team of 6 officers, all equipped with night vision gear and communication devices. The atmosphere was tense but professional, everyone understanding that they were dealing with a desperate woman who had already proven herself capable of elaborate deceptions. "Michael," Detective Morrison said, adjusting the small microphone clipped to his shirt, "remember, we need her to admit to the crimes on tape. Ask her about the fake identity, about David and the kids, about why she did this. But don't push too hard. If she feels cornered, she might run or do something unpredictable. What if she tries to leave with me?" Michael asked. "She won't get the chance. We have the entire area surrounded. The moment we determine she's not going to cooperate, or if you signal that you're in danger, we move in." I watched them wire my son for what was essentially a sting operation, and my stomach churned with worry. "Detective, are you sure Michael should be the one going in there? What if Sarah is armed?" "We've considered that possibility, Mr. Harrison. That's why we have sharpshooters positioned with clear sightlines to the cabin. Your son will never be out of our protection." At 7:45 p.m., Michael drove toward the cabin in his car, while the rest of us monitored from the command post. Through his wire, we could hear his breathing, the sound of gravel crunching under his tires, and the distant hoot of an owl. "I'm approaching the cabin now," Michael said quietly. "Sarah's car is here, the blue Honda Civic." "Copy that," Detective Morrison responded through his earpiece. "Remember, we're with you every step of the way." The cabin came into view as Michael's headlights swept across it. It was a small rustic building, with a stone chimney and a wraparound porch. Warm light glowed from the windows, and smoke drifted from the chimney. If not for the circumstances, it would have looked like the perfect romantic hideaway. Michael parked next to Sarah's car and walked slowly toward the front door. Before he could knock, it opened. "Michael," Sarah's voice came through clearly on the audio feed. "You came." I said I would. Through the microphone, we could hear the sound of the door closing behind him, footsteps on wooden floors, and the crackle of a fire. "You look terrible," Sarah said softly. "I'm so sorry about today. I know how awful this must be for you. Do you, Sarah? Do you really understand what you've put me through? I know I've hurt you and I hate myself for it. But Michael, I need you to understand that everything I felt for you was real. My love for you was the most honest thing in my life." "Honest? You want to talk about honesty? Let's start with your name. Your real name is Sarah Mitchell, not Collins." There was a pause. "Yes, I'm sorry I lied about that. And you're married to David Mitchell. You have been for 6 years. Michael, my marriage to David was over long before I met you. We were living like roommates, not husband and wife, but you never told him that, did you? You never asked for a divorce. It's complicated. David is a good father, but he's not the man I fell in love with anymore. And I couldn't risk losing my children in a custody battle. So instead, you decided to commit bigamy. I never meant for it to go that far. When we started talking about marriage, I kept thinking I would find a way to fix everything. I thought maybe David would ask for a divorce, or maybe I could convince you to wait a little longer. Sarah, you used a dead woman's social security number to create a false identity. That's identity theft. That's a federal crime. The silence stretched so long that I thought the connection might have been lost. Finally, Sarah spoke. How did you find out about that? The police told us. Sarah Collins died in Oregon 3 years ago. You stole her identity. I didn't steal it. I found it. What does that mean? When I was working at the veterinary clinic, a woman brought in her elderly dog to be put down. The dog's name was Sarah, and the woman was crying about how Sarah had been her only family since her daughter died. She kept talking about how her daughter had been named Sarah Collins, and how she had died in a car accident with no husband. No children, no one to carry on her memory. Through the audio, we could hear Michael moving around, probably pacing. So you decided to steal a dead woman's identity. I decided to honor her memory. The woman gave me her daughter's things, photos, documents, everything. She said she couldn't bear to throw them away, but couldn't stand to look at them either. When I looked at Sarah Collins' documents, I realized we were about the same age, similar appearance. It felt like fate. Fate? Sarah, you committed identity theft to facilitate bigamy. There's nothing fateful about that. You don't understand. My marriage to David was suffocating me. I felt like I was disappearing, like Sarah Mitchell was just a role I played, wife, mother, but never myself. When I became Sarah Collins, I could be who I really was. And who you really were was a liar and a fraud. The sound of crying came through the microphone. Michael, please don't say that. I know I made mistakes, but everything I felt for you was real. The woman you fell in love with, she was real. No, she wasn't. The woman I fell in love with was single, had no children, and worked in marketing. That woman never existed, but the feelings were real. The way I laughed with you, the way I felt when you held me, the way my heart raced when I saw your name on my phone, all of that was real. In the command post, Detective Morrison was taking notes and coordinating with her team. We're getting good material, she said to me. But we need more details about the identity theft and her intent regarding the bigamy. Michael must have heard something similar through his earpiece, because his next question was more direct. Sarah, I need to understand something. When you decided to use Sarah Collins' identity, were you already planning to marry me? No, absolutely not. I just wanted to be able to date without feeling guilty, without David asking questions about where I was going. The identity thing started small, just a fake name so I could sign up for dating websites without David finding out. But then it escalated. When I met you, everything changed. You made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. I thought maybe I could just date you for a while, enjoy feeling young and free again. But then I fell in love with you, and you started talking about a future together, and I didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you. So you decided to marry me while still married to David. I thought maybe after we were married, I could find a way to leave David. I thought maybe I could make both marriages work somehow. That's impossible. Sarah, you can't be married to two people at the same time. I know that now. But at the time, I was desperate. I couldn't lose you, but I couldn't lose my children either. Detective Morrison's voice came through Michael's earpiece. Ask her about the phone call today. Ask her who called her during the ceremony. Sarah, during the ceremony today, someone called you. The caller ID said David, home. Was that your husband? Yes, Emma, my daughter, had a fever this morning. David was supposed to take the kids to his mother's house for the weekend, but Emma was too sick to travel. He called to tell me that Emma was asking for me, and that's when you realized your two worlds were colliding. I panicked. I knew if I answered the phone, you would hear David's voice and ask questions. But if I didn't answer, David would keep calling, and Emma might get sicker. I didn't know what to do, so you ran. I ran because I was terrified, not just of getting caught, but of losing everything that mattered to me. You, my children, everything. What about David? Didn't he matter to you at all? David is a good man. He doesn't deserve what I've done to him. But our marriage has been dead for years, Michael. We stay together for the kids, but there's no love left between us. Does David know that? Because when I talked to him, he seemed to think you had a strong marriage. You talked to David. Sarah's voice rose in panic. Yesterday, after the wedding. He had no idea about you and me, Sarah. None at all. He thought you were on a business trip to Seattle. Oh God, what did you tell him? I told him the truth. That his wife of 6 years has been living a double life. The sound of sobbing came through the microphone, and I found myself feeling a strange mix of anger and pity for this woman who had caused so much pain. Sarah, Michael continued, David is devastated. Your children don't understand where their mother is. You've destroyed multiple lives with your lies. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, but they did get hurt. And it's going to get worse because the police are looking for you now. You're facing serious criminal charges. I know. Lisa called and told me. But Michael, that's why I asked you to meet me here. I wanted to see you one more time before I turn myself in. You're going to turn yourself in? I have to. I can't keep running and I can't keep lying. But before I do, I needed you to know that despite everything, despite all the lies and all the pain I've caused, my love for you was real. Detective Morrison's voice came through the earpiece again. We need her to admit intent. Ask her if she knew bigamy was illegal when she decided to marry you. Sarah, when you decided to go through with marrying me, did you know that bigamy was illegal? Yes, I knew, but I thought maybe if we got married in a different state, or if I could somehow make it work legally. There is no legal way to be married to two people at the same time, Sarah. I know that now. I was desperate and stupid, and I thought love could overcome anything. I thought if I loved you enough and if I was a good enough wife to David and mother to my children, somehow everything would work out. That's not how life works. I know, and I'm going to pay for my mistakes. But Michael, before the police come, before I lose everything, I need to ask you something. What? Do you think you could ever forgive me? Not now, maybe not for years, but someday. The silence stretched for almost a minute. I could hear Michael breathing, could almost feel him struggling with the question. Sarah, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. You didn't just lie to me. You made me complicit in your lies. You almost made me an accessory to bigamy. You broke my heart, and you destroyed the trust I had in my own judgment. I understand. But more than that, you have 2 children who need their mother. Whatever happens to you legally, whatever happens between us, you owe it to Emma and Tyler to try to make this right. I know. I'm going to try. Detective Morrison made a hand signal to her team, and I knew they were preparing to move in. Sarah, Michael said, I think it's time for you to keep your promise. You said you were going to turn yourself in. I will. I just need one more minute with you, please. The police are here, aren't they? Sarah's voice suddenly changed, becoming sharp and alert. You brought the police with you. Sarah, you're a fugitive. Of course I brought the police. You set me up. You made me think we could talk, that maybe we could work something out, but you set me up. I didn't set you up. I gave you the chance to do the right thing and turn yourself in. Through the microphone, we could hear the sound of rapid footsteps, a door slamming and Michael's voice calling out, She's running! Detective Morrison immediately activated her radio. Subject is mobile, heading out the back of the cabin. All units converge on the rear of the structure. The next few minutes were chaotic. Through Michael's wire, we could hear shouts, the sound of people running through woods, and finally, the distinctive sound of someone being tackled to the ground. We have her, came the report through the radio. Subject is in custody. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was over. Sarah Mitchell was finally in custody, and Michael was safe. 20 minutes later, they brought Sarah back to the command post in handcuffs. She looked smaller than I remembered from the wedding, her white dress dirty and torn from running through the woods. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled, and makeup streaked down her cheeks. When she saw me standing next to Detective Morrison, she stopped walking. Mr. Harrison, she said quietly, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I've put your family through. I looked at this woman, who had nearly destroyed my son's life, who had committed multiple felonies in pursuit of her selfish desires, and I felt nothing, no anger, no sympathy, just emptiness. Sarah, I said finally, I hope you get the help you need, and I hope you find a way to make this right with your children. They put her in the back of a police car, and as it drove away, Michael came up beside me. How do you feel? I asked him. Tired, he said, and sad. Not just for me, but for David and the kids. This is going to follow them for years. What's next? Detective Morrison said there will be a trial, and I'll probably have to testify. But after that, he shrugged. I guess I try to figure out how to trust someone again. As we drove home that night, I thought about how quickly life can change. 48 hours ago, Sarah Mitchell had been preparing to marry my son. Now she was facing years in prison for bigamy, identity theft and fraud. But more than that, I thought about the ripple effects of her actions. David Mitchell would have to rebuild his life as a single father, explaining to his children why their mother was gone. Michael would have to heal from the betrayal and learn to trust again. And somewhere in Boulder, 2 small children were going to bed without understanding why their world had suddenly changed. Sarah Mitchell had thought she could have it all. 2 husbands, 2 lives, 2 different versions of herself. Instead, she had lost everything and taken so many other people down with her. The woman who had tried to marry my son while already married to another man was finally facing the consequences of her choices. Justice would be served, but the healing would take much longer. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom watching Sarah Mitchell plead guilty to multiple felony charges. She looked different, thinner, paler, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of a wedding dress. Her lawyer had advised her to take a plea deal rather than risk a trial that could result in even harsher sentencing. Judge Patricia Hernandez read the charges aloud. Attempted bigamy, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Each word seemed to echo in the quiet courtroom. Michael sat beside me, his hands folded in his lap. Over the past 3 months, he'd been seeing a therapist to help him process the betrayal and begin to rebuild his ability to trust. It hadn't been easy, but he was making progress. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Hernandez said, before I pass sentence, do you have anything you'd like to say to the court? Sarah stood slowly, her shackled hands clasped in front of her. Your Honor, I want to start by saying that I take full responsibility for my actions. I know that what I did was wrong, and I know that my choices hurt a lot of innocent people. She turned slightly to look at Michael. I want to apologize to Michael Harrison and his family. Michael, you are a good man, and you deserve so much better than what I put you through. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Then she looked toward the back of the courtroom, where David Mitchell sat with his mother. He'd been bringing the children to visit Sarah in jail, trying to maintain some semblance of stability for them while navigating this impossible situation. David, I know my apology can't undo the damage I've done to you and our children. I know I've shattered your trust and turned your life upside down. I'm sorry doesn't seem like enough, but it's all I have. I hope you can find a way to heal and move forward. Judge Hernandez nodded. Mrs. Mitchell, while I appreciate your acknowledgement of wrongdoing, the court must consider the serious nature of your crimes. You maintained multiple false identities for years, defrauded government agencies, and attempted to commit bigamy, which undermines the very foundation of marriage as a legal institution. She paused, reviewing her notes. However, the court also notes that you have no prior criminal record. You cooperated with the investigation after your arrest, and you have expressed genuine remorse for your actions. Taking all factors into consideration, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 3 years, contingent on good behavior and completion of psychological counseling. Sarah's knees buckled slightly, and her lawyer caught her arm to steady her. 5 years meant her children would be 10 and 8 when she was released, if she got parole. They might barely remember her. As the bailiff led Sarah away, she looked back one more time at David and mouthed the words, I'm sorry. David's face remained impassive, but I could see his mother squeeze his hand. After the sentencing, Michael and I walked out of the courthouse together. The media had picked up the story, local woman sentenced for attempted bigamy, and there were a few reporters waiting outside, but we declined to comment and walked to our car. How do you feel? I asked as we drove away. Relieved, I think. It's finally over. The legal part is over. How are you doing with everything else? Michael was quiet for a moment. Dr. Patterson says I'm making good progress. The anger is mostly gone now. Mostly what I feel is sad. For Sarah, for David, for those kids who are going to grow up with their mother in prison. That's not your responsibility, son. I know. But I can't help thinking about how different things could have been if Sarah had just been honest from the beginning. If she'd told me she was married, I never would have pursued a relationship with her. If she'd asked David for a divorce instead of living a lie, maybe they could have worked out custody arrangements that everyone could live with. People make choices, Michael. Sarah chose deception over honesty, and now she's paying the price. 2 weeks after the sentencing, David Mitchell called me. We'd stayed in touch sporadically since that first phone conversation. Both of us trying to help each other make sense of what had happened to our families. David, I was wondering if you and Michael would be willing to meet with me in person. I know it's a lot to ask, but I feel like I need to talk to both of you face to face. I discussed it with Michael, and we agreed to meet David at a quiet restaurant halfway between our two cities. When we walked in, I recognized him immediately from the photos Lisa had shown us. He was a tall, thin man with kind eyes and prematurely grey hair. He stood when he saw us and extended his hand. Mr. Harrison, Michael, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. We ordered coffee and sat in an awkward silence for a moment before David spoke. I wanted to meet with you both because I feel like we're connected now, whether we like it or not. We're all victims of Sarah's deception, and I think we need to figure out how to move forward. How are your children doing? Michael asked. David's face softened. They're struggling. Emma keeps asking when Mommy is coming home, and I don't know how to explain it to her. Tyler is too young to really understand, but he knows something is wrong. We're all in family therapy now, trying to work through it. I'm sorry, Michael said. I know this isn't your fault, but I still feel partially responsible for what happened to your family. Don't, David said firmly. You're as much a victim as we are. Sarah made choices that hurt all of us. The only person responsible for this mess is Sarah. I watched these two, young men, both of whom had been betrayed by the same woman in different ways, and I was struck by their maturity and compassion for each other. David, I said, can I ask you something? Looking back, were there signs that you missed? Things that should have made you suspicious? David nodded slowly. Oh, absolutely. Sarah started taking those weekend business trips about 6 months after she met Michael, though I didn't know that at the time. She became secretive with her phone, protective of her privacy in ways she'd never been before. She started buying new clothes and seemed to be taking more care with her appearance. He paused, staring into his coffee cup. But you have to understand, Sarah had been battling depression since her parents died. When she started seeming happier, more energetic, I was relieved. I thought she was finally healing. I never imagined she was having an affair, let alone living an entire double life. What are you going to do now? Michael asked. I'm filing for divorce, obviously. My lawyer says it should be straightforward given the circumstances. I'm also looking into changing the children's last name. I don't want them to be stigmatized by this as they get older. That's probably wise, I said. The hardest part is figuring out how much contact to allow between Sarah and the kids while she's in prison. Part of me wants to cut her out completely, but Emma loves her mother despite everything. The therapist says it's important for the children to maintain some kind of relationship with her, if possible. That's a difficult balance, Michael said, but it sounds like you're putting your children's needs first, which is what a good father does. I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. We talked for another hour, sharing our experiences and trying to make sense of how one person's lies had affected so many lives. By the end of our conversation, I felt like we'd formed an unlikely friendship born out of shared trauma. As we were getting ready to leave, David turned to Michael. Can I ask you something? Do you think you'll ever be able to trust someone enough to fall in love again? Michael considered the question carefully. My therapist asked me that too. Honestly, I don't know. Right now, the idea of being that vulnerable with someone again terrifies me. But I hope someday I'll be able to get past this. Me too, David said. For both of us. 6 months later, Michael started dating again. Her name was Jennifer, and she was a teacher at the local elementary school. She was patient with Michael's trust issues, understanding about his need to take things slowly, and refreshingly honest about her own past. I watched my son slowly open his heart again, and I was proud of his courage. It would have been easy for him to become bitter and closed off, but he chose to heal instead. A year after the wedding that never was, I received a letter in the mail. The return address showed it was from the state correctional facility where Sarah was serving her sentence. Mr. Harrison, it read, I hope this letter finds you and Michael well. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I think about the harm I caused your family every day. I'm writing to tell you that I've been participating in therapy and counseling programs here, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. My therapist says I have something called borderline personality disorder, which doesn't excuse my actions, but helps explain my pattern of deceptive behavior and my fear of abandonment. I also wanted you to know that I'm using my time here to get my GED and learn job skills, so that when I'm released, I can be a better mother to my children and a productive member of society. I know you have no reason to believe me, given my history of lies, but I want you to know that my feelings for Michael were genuine. The way I expressed those feelings was wrong, criminal even, but the love was real. Please tell Michael that I hope he finds happiness with someone who deserves him and who can give him the honest love he deserves. Sincerely, Sarah Mitchell. I showed the letter to Michael and we discussed whether to respond. In the end, we decided not to. Sarah needed to focus on her own healing and her relationship with her children. Our part in her story was over. Today, 3 years after that interrupted wedding ceremony, Michael is engaged to Jennifer. They're planning a small intimate ceremony with just family and close friends. I couldn't be happier for him. David Mitchell remarried last year to a wonderful woman named Carol, who has embraced his children as her own. Emma and Tyler are thriving in their blended family, and David seems to have found peace. Sarah was released on parole after serving 3 years of her sentence. According to David, she's living in a halfway house and working as a receptionist at a dental office. She has supervised visits with her children twice a month, and David says the kids are slowly rebuilding their relationship with her. As for me, I learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the people we trust most are capable of betraying us in ways we never imagined. But that doesn't mean we should stop trusting. It means we should trust wisely, with our eyes open and our instincts engaged. The woman who tried to marry my son while already married to another man taught us all a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty in relationships. She also showed us how one person's lies can destroy multiple lives, but perhaps most importantly, she showed us that healing is possible. People can recover from betrayal, rebuild their lives, and learn to love again. It takes time, courage, and often professional help, but it can be done. I look at Michael now, planning his wedding to a woman who loves him honestly and completely, and I know that Sarah's deception, as painful as it was, led him to someone better. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you clears the path for the best thing that's yet to come. The phone call that interrupted a wedding ceremony 3 years ago turned out to be the sound of truth, finally breaking through years of lies. And while the truth was painful, it was also liberating. Sometimes that's exactly what we need. A moment when all the lies fall away and we're forced to see reality clearly. It's not always comfortable, but it's always necessary. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it leads us exactly where we need to be. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better? Let me know in the comments and tell me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has reached.